I dropped my ex-wife home after her father's funeral, and I swear I only meant to stay 5 minutes. But at 2 a.m. I was still sitting on her couch, my car keys cold in my hand, wondering how a man who signed divorce papers 8 months ago ended up exactly where he started. Her name was Claire, and 3 years ago she was my wife. We split the way modern people split, quietly, politely, dividing furniture and photographs like we were settling a business account. No screaming, no villains, just two people who stopped reaching for each other in the dark. But the day her father was lowered into the ground, the woman I once promised forever to stood at that grave with no one's hand to hold, and somehow mine was the number she called. I told myself I was just being decent. A ride home, a door held open, the bare minimum a good man owes the woman he used to love. But when she turned on that porch step, eyes swollen, voice barely a whisper, and said, "Come inside for 5 minutes." I knew, the way you know a storm is coming, that those 5 minutes were going to cost me something. So why did her father's funeral feel less like an ending and more like a door creaking open? What was waiting for me inside a house I'd spent 8 months teaching myself to forget? And why, when the clock struck 2 a.m. and neither of us had said the one thing we were both thinking, did walking out feel impossible? I stayed. And before that night was over, I'd learn exactly why some marriages end on paper, but never end in the heart. The house smelled exactly the way I remembered. Lavender, warm wood, something faintly like cinnamon that Claire always kept in a small dish by the door. 8 months of trying to forget this place, and my body remembered it the way lungs remember air. She didn't turn on the main lights, just the small lamp in the corner, the one we'd argued about once because I thought it was too dim and she said it was cozy. I remember thinking, even then, that we were two people who saw the same room completely differently. Maybe that was always the warning sign we refused to read. She moved to the kitchen without a word. I heard the kettle, the soft click of cabinet doors, the specific rhythm of someone making tea not because they're thirsty, but because they need something to do with their hands. I stood in the middle of her living room and looked around. There was a photo on the mantel I hadn't seen before. Her and her father, maybe 15 years ago, standing on a beach somewhere, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. He had his arm around her, and she was leaning into him the way children do when they still believe their parents are invincible. Something moved through my chest. Not a thought, just a weight. I set my keys on the coffee table, just to rest my hand. That's what I told myself. She came back with 2 mugs and handed me one without asking if I wanted it. Chamomile. She remembered. I hadn't had chamomile tea since the last night I'd slept in this house, and the taste of it hit me somewhere behind the ribs before I'd even taken a sip. She sat on the far end of the couch. Not close, not distant enough to be rude, just enough space to say we are no longer the people who touch each other without thinking. Neither of us spoke for what felt like a long time. Then she said quietly, staring into her mug, "He asked about you. Last month. I didn't tell you because I didn't know how." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She finally looked up, and her eyes were dry but devastated. The kind of devastated that's too tired even for tears. He said, "Is Marcus okay? Does he know I don't blame him?" She paused. I didn't know what to say, so I just said yes. Her father, a man I'd called Dad for 3 years. A man who taught me how to change brake pads in a church parking lot one Saturday afternoon because he said every man should know how. A man whose handshake felt like an approval I'd been waiting my whole life for. And in his last weeks, while I was 8 months into pretending I was fine, he was asking if I was okay. I set the mug down because my hands weren't steady anymore. "Claire, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. The way she always did when she sensed something real was about to enter the room. But that was always our problem, wasn't it? Both of us so careful, so terrified of saying the wrong thing that we slowly, quietly said nothing at all, until silence became the loudest thing between us. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 8 months. The tiredness around her eyes, the way she was holding the mug with both hands like it was the only warm thing left in the world. The woman who had once slow danced with me in this very kitchen at midnight for no reason at all. And I thought about 5 minutes, about how I'd promised myself 5 minutes. The clock on the wall read 9:47 p.m. I didn't move. She set her mug down on the table, and the small sound of ceramic against wood felt louder than it should have in that quiet house. I used to practice, she said, just like that. No lead-up, no warning. I turned to look at her. Practice what? She pulled her knees up to her chest, the same way she used to sit when something was too heavy to say standing up. Telling you, the real reason I asked for the divorce. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the lamp. That dim, cozy lamp I'd complained about once. I must have practiced it 100 times in the mirror. Every version. Soft, direct, clinical, angry. She almost smiled, but it didn't make it to her eyes. None of them ever felt right. My chest went still, because I'd spent 8 months building a story in my head about why we ended. I had my version. It was neat. It was safe. It said we'd simply grown apart. Two good people, wrong timing, nobody's fault. But the way she was sitting right now told me that story was a lie I told myself so I could sleep at night. Claire. My voice came out lower than I intended. What are you saying? She finally looked at me, and what I saw in her face wasn't anger. It wasn't blame. It was something far more frightening than either of those things. It was grief. The kind that's been folded up and stored carefully for a very long time. I was pregnant, Marcus. The room didn't change. The lamp still glowed. The clock still ticked. But something in the air shifted, the way air shifts before lightning, when the whole world holds its breath. I lost it at 11 weeks, she said. 6 months before I filed. I heard the words. I understood each one individually. But my mind kept refusing to line them up into a sentence that made sense, because if they were true, if that sentence was real, then everything I thought I knew about the worst year of my life had just been turned inside out. You were... I stopped. Started again. We were pregnant? She nodded. Once. Small. Like even that small movement cost her something. I didn't tell you. Her voice was steady in the way that only comes from rehearsing pain until it stops surprising you. I found out on a Tuesday. I was going to tell you Friday. I had this whole thing planned. Dinner. The little onesie from the store on Birch Street. She pressed her lips together. But Thursday I woke up and something was wrong. And by Friday there was nothing left to tell you. I felt something move through me that I don't have a clean word for. Not anger. Not sadness. Something older than both. Something that lived in the part of me that had loved this woman completely and had never fully understood why, one ordinary morning, she started disappearing right in front of my eyes. Why didn't you tell me anyway? I asked. And I was careful, so careful, to keep my voice from becoming an accusation, because I could see what this had cost her just to say aloud. Even after. Claire, why didn't you tell me? She looked down. Because I watched you, she said softly. After. I watched you go to work. Come home. Eat dinner. Watch TV. And you were fine, Marcus. You were just fine. And I was dissolving. Every single day I was dissolving. And you didn't see it. She paused. And I couldn't decide which was more terrifying. That you didn't notice. Or that maybe there was nothing to notice because it hadn't touched you the way it touched me. That landed somewhere it couldn't be taken back from. Because she was right. I hadn't noticed. I'd seen her getting quieter, yes. Seen her pulling back. But I'd done what I always did. I'd given her space. I told myself she just needed time. I'd waited patiently. Like patience was the same thing as presence. It wasn't. I wasn't fine, I said. My voice broke on the last word. Just barely. But enough. I didn't know what I'd lost. But I wasn't fine, Claire. I was performing fine because I didn't know what else to do. Because you stopped letting me in and I didn't know how to knock. She looked at me then with something new in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something cracking open behind the grief. Something that looked a little like relief that the secret was finally in the room with both of us instead of just her. I named her, Claire whispered. In my head. I never told anyone. Not even my dad. She stopped. Breathed. Lily. And that one word was what finally broke me open. Not the revelation. Not the years of silence. Not even the image of Claire standing alone in some doctor's office on a Thursday morning while I was at work being perfectly, obliviously fine. It was the name. Because a name means someone had already become real. Someone had already been loved before she ever took a single breath. I didn't reach for Claire's hand. I wanted to, but I sat with the weight of it instead, the way you sit with something sacred. And the silence between us now was a completely different kind of silence than before. Not empty, not cold. Heavy with everything that had finally been said. Outside, rain had started at some point without either of us noticing. It tapped against the window in a slow, unsteady rhythm. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. The clock read 11:20 p.m. And I understood. Sitting there in that dim living room with cold tea and a name I'd never heard before tonight, that the marriage hadn't ended because we stopped loving each other. It had ended because we both stopped believing the other one could hold the heaviest parts of us. But here's what I couldn't stop thinking, and what I knew was about to change everything before this night was over. She told me now, after everything, after the papers, after 8 months, after her father's funeral and a porch step and 5 minutes. She told me now, and the only question left, the one neither of us had the courage to say out loud yet, was what on earth were we supposed to do with the truth? I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, listening to the rain, looking at the woman who had once been my whole life, who had carried a grief so enormous it had quietly swallowed our marriage whole, and I let the truth settle into me the way cold settles into bone. Slowly, completely, without permission. Lily. The name kept moving through me like a current. A daughter I never knew existed. A Thursday I'd spent at work answering emails while my wife sat alone in a doctor's office watching something irreplaceable slip away. A Friday dinner that never happened. A onesie from the store on Birch Street that I imagined somewhere still had a price tag on it. I thought about all the nights I'd lain in my apartment these past 8 months, staring at the ceiling, running through every memory like a detective searching for the moment it went wrong, replaying arguments, measuring silences, wondering which version of me had failed her. And the whole time, the real answer had been sitting in a room I was no longer allowed to enter. I stood up, slowly. Claire watched me with careful eyes, the eyes of someone bracing for impact. Someone who had learned, maybe too well, to expect people to leave when things got too heavy. And I recognized that look because I had seen it before and done nothing about it. I had given her space when she needed me to take up space. I had been patient when I should have been present. Not this time. I walked to the mantel, to the photograph. Her and her father on that beach, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I picked it up gently and looked at it for a long moment. This man who, in his final weeks, had asked if I was okay. Who didn't blame me. Who somehow, even from his sickbed, had more grace in him than I'd had in 8 years of trying to be a good man. I set the photo back down carefully. Then I turned around. "I'm sorry," I said. "And I want to be clear, I don't mean the kind of sorry you say to fill silence. I mean the kind that starts somewhere deep in the chest and costs you something on the way out. I'm sorry I wasn't there on that Thursday. I'm sorry I gave you space when you needed me to stay close. I'm sorry I performed fine so convincingly that you thought I didn't feel anything." I stopped, steadied myself. "And I'm sorry that you carried Lily alone. For all this time, completely alone. That should never have happened. No matter what was going on between us, that should never have happened." Claire's composure, which had held together so carefully all night, finally came undone. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way movies show it, with heaving sobs and collapsing shoulders. It was quieter than that. More devastating than that. Her eyes filled, and one single tear ran down her left cheek, and she pressed her lips together hard. The way people do when they're trying to hold a whole ocean inside a very small space. "I didn't want you to feel guilty," she whispered. "I know," I said. "But Claire, I needed to feel it. We needed to feel it together. That's what I didn't understand then." I moved back to the couch. Not to the far end this time. I sat close. Close enough that she could feel I was choosing to be there. "That's what I think we got wrong. Both of us. We were so careful with each other. So terrified of being too much. And we ended up being not enough." She looked at me with something broken and something open existing in the same expression at the same time. I don't know what this means, she said honestly. Tonight. Any of this. I'm not saying I want to. She stopped. Tried again. I'm not even sure what I'm saying. You don't have to say anything, I told her. And this time, when I said those words, I didn't mean change the subject. I meant exactly what I said. I'm not asking you for anything tonight, Claire. I'm not sitting here because I think one conversation fixes 8 months or 3 years or a Thursday in March. I held her gaze. I'm sitting here because you lost your father today. And 16 months ago, you lost a daughter you never got to hold. And you've been carrying all of that by yourself. And I can't leave you alone with it again. Not tonight. Something moved across her face that I don't think I'll ever fully be able to describe. Like watching a window that's been shut for years open just a crack. Just enough to let the air change. She leaned her head against my shoulder. That's all. No grand declaration. No dramatic kiss. Just her head on my shoulder, and my hand, finally, after 8 months of forgetting how, resting gently over hers. Outside, the rain kept falling. The lamp kept glowing. And the clock on the wall moved quietly past midnight, past 1, past 2. Neither of us marking it, neither of us rushing toward it. At some point she fell asleep. Right there, sitting up, exhausted in the way that only comes when you've finally set down something unbearably heavy. And I stayed. Not because I was confused. Not because I was weak. But because staying was the first truly clear decision I'd made in a very long time. I thought about her father in that photograph. Laughing at something outside the frame. Asking from a hospital bed if I was okay. I thought about a little girl named Lily who had existed in love before she existed in the world. I thought about 2 people who had been so afraid of being too much for each other that they had quietly, carefully become too little. And I made a quiet decision. Not a promise to Claire, not yet, because she deserved more than a promise made at 2 a.m. in the wreckage of a funeral day. But a promise to myself. That I was done performing fine. Done giving space instead of presence. Done being the man who waited patiently on the outside of someone's pain and called it respect. Whatever came next, whatever Claire decided when the sun came up and the world started again, I was going to show up differently. For her. For whatever version of us still existed somewhere beneath the paperwork and the silence and the grief. Because some things end on paper. But some things, the real things, the ones with names, the ones that live in the part of you that a lawyer can't reach, those things don't end just because you stop fighting for them. Sometimes they just wait. Quietly. Patiently. In a house that smells like lavender and cinnamon, with a lamp that's just dim enough to be cozy, and a clock that doesn't care what time it is. Only that you're finally still. I was still there at 2 a.m. And for the first time in 8 months, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. If the story moved something in you, if Marcus and Claire made you feel something real tonight, then you already know this channel is different. We don't just tell stories here. We tell the ones that live inside people. The ones nobody says out loud. The ones that needed a voice. Subscribe right now. And hit that notification bell, because the next story we're telling, it will find you at exactly the right moment. The kind of story that makes you call someone you've been meaning to call. The kind that reminds you what you still have time to fix. Don't miss it. We'll see you there.